morning, welcome everybody, and welcome to the BCS Learning Development Specialist Group meeting this evening. Okay, so this evening's talk is on IT skills frameworks. How do they all fit together? With myself, Kevin Streater, I'm the chair of BCS Learning Development Specialist Group. So before we get started, I'm just going to do a few slides about the group. I know we've got a number of people who haven't been to one of our meetings before joining this evening. So the BCS Learning Development Specialist Group is a group for those involved in the development, delivery, or management of learning to IT and communications professionals and users. Hopefully in that description, you'll find something of interest and relevance to yourself. So anyone that's interested in the process of learning around IT, hopefully we are the specialist group for you. To give you a bit of profile in our membership, about 18% of our members are IT end user skills training people, so office applications, etc. About 18% are IT professional skills training specialists, so things like Prince, ITIL, and so on. 16% come from the world of IT technical skills training, so much more around products training. 16% from the university and education sector, and then a third of our group just have a general interest in IT skills topics. We do have a website. On the left-hand side, we've got the Learning Development Specialist Group website. All of our events are listed there, as is the link to the archive of past events. And on the right-hand side, we have a YouTube channel on the BCS member groups page, which is where we have the recordings of all our events going back some 3 years now on a variety of different learning and development and IT skills related topics. So please feel free to go in and watch any of our past events. And if you've got ideas for future events, then please let us know. We do have our own Twitter handles, so please follow us on social media if you want to hear about future events that the group are running. And we have 600 followers at the moment. We've got nearly 1,000 members in the group overall, and just updating numbers, we've done about 4,700 tweets so far. If you're particularly interested in the world of skills development and some of the ideas and things that go on behind it, then the group were involved in the development of one of the BCS publications on technical training management that we did jointly with SEDMA Europe, the Training Directors Network. So you can buy that as a BCS book, either as hard copy or as an EPUB, and lots of useful information in there. And for the rest of the year, this year we're running all our events around the 4 BCS priorities of community, inspiration, progression, and influence. So in the autumn season, we're going to be running an event around community and diversity, and then one about how to write a book. So BCS Publishing, Charles from BCS Publishing is going to come along and she'll talk to us about how to get a book published and what the process is. If you have any other ideas, then here's my email address. Please drop them through to me, and the committee are always happy to take any suggestions for future events. So that's our introduction, and hopefully that gives you some context as to the group and who we've got involved in the specialist group. So this evening, I'm going to be talking about ISO 24773. But before we do that, I'd like to do a poll. So if you could go to slido.com and enter this number, then hopefully you will see a poll. And if you can put in what IT skills frameworks do you know of? So you can just take a moment to put something in, and you just need to enter this number 2609511. Hopefully that will take you to a page where you can put in just the name of any IT skills frameworks that you know of. Okay, let's see how we're doing on the poll. Michelle, can I just check it's working?
We can't see it on the screen at the moment.
No, hopefully everyone can get to it. So
I'll
let's
just test it in a second.
if I switch over. Okay, we're starting to put some. Okay, we've got SOFIA, DDAT, somebody from government, ICD, ECF, that's SOFIA Plus, ICD has got to be Ian, COBIT, Cloud, ITIL. Okay, any others? SOFIA's the big one, SOFIA Plus. Okay. Looking for any new ones. Apprenticeships. Oh, ECF, it's down there. Okay. Okay, so I'll keep the poll open, but if you think of any others as we go through, then please add them to the screen. But yeah, SOFIA is standing out. It's quite a big one here. Oh, DDAT's got another vote. The question is, how do they all relate? Lots of different skills frameworks are used for different things. So some can be quite technical, some are quite behavioral, but how can we link them all together? So let's go back. Okay. So what types of frameworks are there? There's knowledge frameworks, there's skills frameworks, there's competency frameworks, there's technical skills frameworks, there's behavioral frameworks. How do we link all of these together? Is there a meaningful way of doing it? Well, there is, but first of all, let's have a think about what are we trying to do with these frameworks? This comes to the skills management cycle. So what are we trying to do when we're using these frameworks? We're trying to manage the skills process. So skills management is about planning and organizing the workforce, sourcing and recruiting talent, assigning resources by capability, assessing skills, performance and capability, identifying gaps, identifying skills development needs and opportunities, planning and executing development activities to build capability and performance, and rewarding and compensating individuals for their skills and competence. So we need to have a consistent approach to skills definitions so that we can do these various tasks. But these are what we do with skills in our workplaces constantly. We're always thinking about, how do we recruit people? How do we source them? How do we make sure we're slotting the right people into doing the right roles? Do they have the right abilities? Can they perform at the right level? What skills development do we need to undertake? So a lot of dimensions of skills management, and it's a diagram like this. It's a skills management cycle. So you start acquiring talent, deploy them, assessing them, and so on. So this is the idea behind skills. This is why we need to have frameworks. it helps make sure that management can make good use of the human resource that's available. It helps line managers, it helps HR, it helps employees. By using skills frameworks, organizations can achieve a consistent and integrated skills and people management approach. That's great for the theory, but how do you make sure you've got the right skills frameworks? And how do you make sure you fitted them together? Well, very helpfully, there is an ISO standard, ISO IEC 24773, that should say. So I'll just introduce you to the standard and what it's about. So ISO 24773 is the Software and Systems Engineering Certification of Software and System Engineering Professionals General Requirements. And it's the general set of requirements that's part of a broader series of standards around developing and certifying professionals in software engineering and systems engineering. There is a related standard, ISO 17024, which is about how you deliver certification schemes. So anywhere where you've taken an assessment, whether that be something like project management with Prince 2 assessment certification, it could be a technical qualification, it could even be a chartered IT professional, so on. They all should comply with ISO 17024. But that just talks about delivery. It doesn't talk about how you structure skills. What 24773 does is define a relationship model for the major components of technical certifications. Now, when we talk about technical certification, this could be anything from a very precise product or process-based certification. Equally, it could be something as broad as chartered engineer, chartered IT professional. So in there are three major concepts: knowledge, skills, and competence. And what I see repeatedly is many people confusing these concepts and how they relate to each other. They talk about knowledge when they really mean competence. They talk about skill when they mean knowledge. So how do these three relate? Well, there's a very helpful diagram in the standard that says, for a certification scheme to work, this is any form of recognition of skills, candidates must demonstrate that they have competency in the domain, the skills necessary to be competent, so you can have one or more skills to be competent, and the knowledge that underpins those skills. As long as you've got the relevant skills and knowledge, you can become competent, you can demonstrate competency. And if you can demonstrate competency, you can be awarded the relevant certification. But what does this mean in practice? Well, that's a nice model, but what do we mean by knowledge, skills, and competence? Knowledge are items that are generally agreed to be essential to understanding a particular subject at a specific cognitive level. So these are the things you must just know about. Skill is then when you have the ability to apply that knowledge to perform a simple operation in a controlled environment. The competence is any ability to apply knowledge and skills in order to achieve a successful result on an ongoing basis. So to me, this means knowledge and skills is what you do in a training environment or in workplace learning. That's your ground school. If you're learning to fly a plane, you do your ground school. You learn all the theory. You show that you can do the maths. But it doesn't take the place of actually flying a plane. That's competence. If you are certified to be able to fly a plane solo, you have demonstrated that you are now competent and you have the competence to fly a plane solo. You have demonstrated that you've been able to apply the knowledge and the skills in a controlled environment, so now you're able to go and do it without support. You are a true practitioner. So what does the standard say about this? Well, the standard lays out a couple of tables. The first is that you have a series of knowledge statements. Each knowledge statement is related to a cognitive level. So how much do you need to know? Is it just awareness? Is it real deep knowledge of a particular topic? But what level do you need to understand this knowledge? The second table is about skills. So to demonstrate a skill, so the ability to apply knowledge, there's a list of knowledge requirements that you need to demonstrate. What do you get from this? Well, you get a demonstration of performance. So you can meet a certain performance level description. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, this sounds awfully like Bloom's taxonomy. Well, it is. The first three levels of Bloom's taxonomy are around knowledge. They are about cognitive levels. The later statements in Bloom's taxonomy are about skills. And they're saying, can you actually apply this knowledge in a meaningful way? Can you show us performance? So Bloom's taxonomy fits very nicely to the ISO standard, but the standard is much more authoritative as a global document that everyone can reference. But these two areas relate very closely to Bloom's taxonomy. So what do you do with these once you've defined the knowledge and the skills? Well, you can combine the list of knowledge required to demonstrate competency and the list of skills to demonstrate competency to show how you can meet a competency description. That gives you a level of proficiency. So you can now demonstrate that you are proficient because you have the knowledge for the competency that you're training for. You also have the skills required to demonstrate that you are competent. So you have reached a certain level of proficiency. Well, this going back to the learning how to fly a plane analogy. Proficiency, you may be competent at first level, which is you could know everything that you need to know, and you've got skills to fly a plane, but you're not quite ready to do it solo. So you're at the beginning of the proficiency curve. So that might be the first level of proficiency. The second is you can fly the plane, but with an instructor with you. And the final is final proficiency level is you're now completely free to go and fly the plane without any further assistance. You can take complete control. So you've now reached top level of proficiency. So we've got a really solid way now of being able to link knowledge, skills, and competency. From that, there is a further extrapolation you can make, which is to say that you can now use this to define roles. This isn't part of the standard, which is why I put it in orange, but for a role, you can now list a number of competencies. So to be able to perform this particular role, you need to be competent in this area and this area at certain levels of performance. So it gives us a nice structure for how we can link together knowledge, skills, competence, proficiency, and performance levels so that you can see if you are fully equipped and able to perform a role. 24773 also includes a number of sort of generic statements. It's expected that anyone working in a professional environment should be able to communicate effectively, identify, formulate, and solve problems, function effectively as an individual and a team and in a team, and can evaluate the probable social, commercial, cultural, ethical, and environmental consequences of their work as a professional engineer. So these are just given statements. You need to fulfill these to be a professional in software engineering domain, in fact, in any professional domain. The standard also goes on to list a set of code of ethics and professional practices. And anyone that's here that's a member of BCS or the IET or any other professional body should recognize this list of ethics and professional practice statements. They're encoded in the standard, but they are also core to most professional body codes of ethics and codes of practice. So most of these are very standard generic statements. The first one is very clear: the certified person, the person that has met the competency requirements, shall obey the laws of the community in which they operate. So it does say certification schemes as defined by the standard do relate to being part of a community of practicing professionals. So that's the core of the standard. That's what the standard is all about. It's about linking knowledge, skills, and competence in order to be certified as a professional in a particular role. Final piece in the standard, I forgot. There is also a requirement in the standard that anyone who is certified in any form should undertake some form of continuous professional development. And the standard is very clear. It says there is a requirement for continual professional development appropriate to the titles that they have been certified for, and that this should include the number of hours or CPD points required and a justification for the CPD requirement. So is this CPD requirement to ensure that by continually assessing and ensuring competence, it is reducing a particular risk? So by being certified isn't enough. Being certified and being part of a continuing professional development program means that you're maintaining your current competence. Therefore, you should be able to reduce the risks of making an error through not being suitably trained. So this should all sound very relevant and very familiar to anyone who's a member of any professional body. It's also the basis for a lot of other schemes in industry. So things like ISC Squared with their CISP certification meets all of these requirements. The Prince project management certification all meet these requirements. So you can see this standard has really been adopted quite widely. Sometimes very aware of the standard. Sometimes organizations aren't particularly aware of the standard. But as a basis, it really does sum up the general approach to certification and skills development. So what I just want to talk through now is 3 different examples of this being used. First one I want to talk about is just cybersecurity. So in the UK now, we have CyBOK, the cybersecurity body of knowledge. CyBOK is pretty much the best part of 800 pages of detailed technical knowledge about the cybersecurity domain. If you look up CyBOK 1.1, you'll find a nice diagram that lays out all of the different elements around cybersecurity, covering human, organization and regulatory, attacks and defenses, system security, software and platform security, and infrastructure security. It's got huge depth to it. It's not particularly written to support the skills management cycle. Think about how do you use this as the basis for assessing current competence? Well, you need to build on from this to build out what are the relevant skills that you're going to demonstrate through the application of the knowledge. How is this going to then help you demonstrate that you've got competence? Eventually you'll get to the point of saying, well, actually, I can fulfill a role as a cyber professional. It's directly traceable back if you use the model that's in the standard, but it's not actually applying CyBOK directly. Because it's a body of knowledge, it fits very specifically into one part of what the standard describes. So there's a second level. You can have specialist skills frameworks. So Chartered Institute of Information Security has a skills framework. This breaks down the skills that you need to be successful in the cybersecurity industry. It's got 9 technical domains, 2 responsibility domains, very specialist, very detailed, and is easily demonstratable that if you've got the knowledge, you should be able to demonstrate these skills at a certain level of proficiency. So it's a very good domain-specific skills framework. But if you just use this, you're looking at one set of specialisms. When you're looking at organizational skills management, you need to start looking a lot wider than that. So just go through the detail in the CISEC skills framework and say it pretty much covers most domains, and they do relate back to what is on the CyBOK diagram. So everything that's in CyBOK is here, but this is now looking at it from an application perspective. So a whole set of sections there. What we really need is something that covers sort of the whole domain of IT. You need a generalist framework. So there happens to be a very good generalist framework. It's called SOFIA, and used to be the skills framework for the information age. This describes the whole spectrum of what is going on in the skills domain. In SOFIA, you can see you've got a whole range of categories. You've got everything from strategy and architecture, change and transformation, development and implementation, relationships, delivery and operations, people and skills, and you've got the levels of responsibility, which are the proficiency levels for a competency scheme. So in SOFIA, you can now see at a very high level, where do you fit in an organization? Which are the primary competencies? So this is the competency level of skills frameworks. And if you look at security specifically, we've seen the 800-page depth of CyBOK. We've seen the sort of the 12 different skills areas of the CISEC frameworks. Well, SOFIA takes this to the competence level. And in terms of competence, these are the primary areas of competence in cybersecurity. And in the SOFIA framework, there are 7 levels of proficiency, and each of these skills are defined across those 7 levels. And each time we're going through this, we're going to a higher level of abstraction. So say my role is primarily about, say, vulnerabilities. So I might do some vulnerability research and some vulnerability assessment. They come from 2 different areas in the SOFIA framework, and there's some nice headline descriptions there of what that role is going to look like. So very easily you're starting to see, okay, here's an outline of the role. Here are the core things, the core responsibilities of the role. So can we link these all together? Well, using the model that's in the standard, yes, we can. So at the lowest level, on the right-hand side, we've got things like the APM body of knowledge for project management. We've got CyBOK, all the bodies of knowledge on the right-hand side. Then we've got the specialist skills frameworks that go into detail about what skills should you be able to demonstrate based on that knowledge. And then at the top level, you've got the generalist frameworks, the sort of the meta frameworks, which are things like SOFIA that describe the whole industry. So that's one example, but I just want to show you a couple of other examples briefly. The second is SOFIA Plus. So anyone that's a BCS member can go into My BCS and take a look at this. One of the tabs is to have a look at the SOFIA Plus browser, and you get a view of SOFIA. But what you also get are for each skill at each level. You get a description of some background about what it's the skills describing, the domain, typical work activities, the knowledge and skills that support this skill, this competence, training that's relevant, professional development activities, and qualifications that all support this competence area. And as you can see, there are sometimes competence and skills can get intermingled, and it certainly happens in SOFIA Plus. But you've got the ability here to start seeing how things are connected. So in SOFIA Plus, you've got the competency description. You've got a very generic one that just defines the domain, and then you've got the level that says at proficiency level 3, you should be able to, and then describes what you can do. That's then broken down in SOFIA Plus into work activities. So things like being able to understand vulnerabilities, be able to undertake vulnerability assessment. These are your skills that have been called out. Then it goes on to list the knowledge. So you've got knowledge of a whole range of different topics. And what you'll see in the knowledge areas is a lot of these are quite technical. And this is where technical skill certifications will usually come in. So are you an expert in Linux? Do you have the relevant certifications to use a particular analytical tool or to perform a certain technique? They're all really supporting knowledge. So many of the well-known industry certifications are actually knowledge certifications. Very few are skills certifications, even fewer are competence. I'd say there are a couple of industry certifications that do touch on competence, but very, very few. They're primarily knowledge. And then supporting, you have a number of behavioral skills, which are just the things that you should be able to demonstrate as a professional that really come from the generic areas in the standard. So the second example I just want to talk through is the occupational standards. Now, these are the standards that are being put together by the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. So they only apply to England, but they are actually a very good example of using the model that is in ISO 24773. So when a new occupational standard is being put together, it's using the basis of describing duties. Now, duties and competence really are the same thing. So each duty of a role is made up of a number of areas. It's made up of knowledge, it's made up of skills, and it's made up of behaviors. These are then used to help shape and inform the training plan. They're used for apprenticeships, so they inform the training plan for apprenticeships. They also inform the end assessment. And how do you assess somebody as being competent and ready to fulfill a role? So it's very close to the model that is laid out in the ISO standard. And IFATE's description of knowledge, skills, and behaviors are here. So knowledge is the information, the technical knowledge, the know-how the individual needs to have to understand and successfully carry out the duties that make up the occupation. Skills are the practical application of the knowledge. They have learned these through on and or off the job training experience. And they're always described in terms of a verb. And behaviors are your mindsets, your attitudes, your approaches that support competence. Hopefully seeing these are all the same terms that I outlined from the standard, just being applied through slightly different lenses. So SOFIA's got a one take on it. IFATE in their definition of occupational standards, taking a slightly different take, but it's all tying back to the model that we first looked at that came from 24773. So there's some guidance that I8 published that says, typically when you're describing an occupation, you will have 15 to 20 knowledge statements, 15 to 20 skills statements, and 5 to 6 behavior statements. This is quite a good guide if you're writing job descriptions. This is pretty good guidance in how do you write job descriptions. What are the skills that you want to see demonstrated? What are the knowledge areas that you want to make sure somebody knows about? What are the behaviors people should demonstrate in the role? So when occupational standards are defined, you have to go through a process of identifying quite deliberately what are the duties, the knowledge, the skills, and the behaviors required to perform a particular occupation successfully. And guidance that I8 provides is that you should only include knowledge, skills, and behaviors at their highest level. So if you need to be fully aware of a particular knowledge domain, you need to say you need to be fully trained in that area of knowledge. You need to make sure you're calling out the detail of what do you really need to do in order to fulfill this occupation successfully. Then there's some general guidance about the type of language, future proofing, and also being quite specific where you can. So here's an example of one that I was involved in developing. So description is a role of providing first-line cybersecurity support. What you then have to do is work out what are the requirements, what are the duties, the competencies that somebody in this role needs to demonstrate. So I've just taken an extract from the standard, but you need to be able to demonstrate that you are fully competent with duty 1, applying procedures and controls to maintain security and control of an organization. That's a competence statement. You need to make sure that the person performing this role is competent and can fulfill that duty in its entirety. So we've got a set of duties that need to be performed in order to fulfill the role. But underneath, you have all the knowledge and the skill statements. So the knowledge topics, and there's a lot more than I've got on the slide, but the knowledge is described in terms of knowing about the principles, knowing about cybersecurity policies and standards, knowing about very specific technical controls, knowing about legislation. It's all knowing statements. It's all knowing and understanding things that are required in order to fulfill the duties we've outlined. Then you also have to show the application with the skills. So you need to demonstrate in a controlled environment that you can follow information security procedures, that you can maintain information security controls. So these are the demonstration, the application of the knowledge in order to demonstrate that you have skill. If you've got all of these elements of knowledge and skills, then you should be fulfilling this list of duties. If you're meeting all the requirements of these duties, you're competent in all these duties, you will then be fulfilling this role. So again, it's all tying back to that model that is in the standard, that if you think about, okay, what's the role? What are you certifying somebody to do? What are the competencies? What are the knowledge and skills that support those competencies? You've got a nice structure for building an occupation and implementing the skills management cycle. So finally, before we go to some Q&A, a sample of trying it. If you want to try this for yourself, it's very straightforward. And I've tried this with a couple of colleagues at work, and it works quite nicely. So what do you need to do? You can take a role. You can think of somebody that's performing a particular job and start identifying what are the core day-to-day responsibilities in that role. If you can define quite concisely in that sort of 15 to 20 range, the requirements, you've got your list of competencies that you're looking for. If you can list those competencies, you've got a well-described role that you need to recruit for, that you can employ somebody to that. You understand what they can be assigned to. You can also then use that to help them develop their career. The next stage is to think about, okay, so what knowledge do you need to be able to fulfill that role? And you can start listing out, okay, to do my job, I need to know about this thing and this thing and this thing. Okay, so that's your knowledge requirement. Skills. What do you need to be able to demonstrate so that you can apply that knowledge proficiently? So you can start building a list of skills. And behaviors. What are these generic behaviors you should be demonstrating whilst performing your role? So you could actually build your own profile quite easily. This is particularly useful if you're looking at an organization saying, how do I build a skills development program for this team here? How do I help onboard new hires? What are the things we need to teach them to help them to be competent and perform in their role? And the way to approach it is to really use this model from the standard. Say, okay, identify the competencies, identify the knowledge, identify the skills, identify the behaviors. You can build your training program from there. So one that's active at the moment, is developing a profile, an occupational profile for doing digital forensics. First duty on the list is about maintaining evidence management and handling exhibits. So there's a whole list of duties that have been identified. Now, you could do this with your own role, anyone else's role, just looking at what do you need to do to perform this role well. And you can write out a list of duties. From that list of duties, you can then use this development template. At the top, we've got the competence. So the first on the duties list was maintaining evidence management, handling exhibits and evidential material, and so on. In the first column, you put the knowledge. What do you need to do to be able to explain this to me? And you can start pulling out very specific knowledge statements. Well, this is great because this is now the basis for building training content. So this is your lecture content. These are your seminars. These are the things that you can teach people. It's knowledge transfer. So that first column is about building your knowledge transfer program. The second pillar is then, okay, what do you need to actually show me? And you can start writing a list of, okay, actually what I need you to be able to show me is that you can actually handle and store digital exhibits. You can handle personal and sensitive data. So you can stay in compliance with submission examination criteria. These then become the basis for your exercises. So many hands-on training courses are actually built around skill statements. Teach the knowledge and then you demonstrate it with a lab. Well, the lab is demonstrating skill. So this is your structure for building lab and exercises to demonstrate that you can apply the knowledge. And then finally, you've got the column of what needs to be observed. So this is when you're performing the role, are you demonstrating effective communication? Are you doing safe physical manual handling? So these become the additional elements that you need to assess to make sure that somebody's really proficient in their role. But you could actually sit and write one of these relatively easily. We've been doing it with the digital forensics Trailblazer group. You can do this with any job where you can just pull out the knowledge, the skills, behaviors to give you the competence that then builds up to the role. So the takeaways. We've got the skills management cycle. Why do we do all of this? We want to have a structured approach to doing skills development. The introduction to the standard says that's why the standards have been written. They have been written so that we can have consistency in approach for our skills development programs for professional engineering roles, so that we can say if somebody is accredited to a program that has been built in accordance with the standard in one particular area, it will be comparable with somebody who's built a program that's comparable in another area. We then get this integrated skills model. You've got a role, you've got duties, which are your competencies, you've got your knowledge, skills, and behaviors, and technical knowledge and technical skills are just a subset of knowledge and skills. A lot of organizations go straight for building a technical skills matrix. That's great, but that's just an element of understanding what the training requirement is, what the skills development requirement is. You actually need to describe the whole framework. What's the complete picture of knowledge and skills and behaviors? What are the competencies that you're aiming for, so that you'll know that you're building skills development programs that are really going to address the requirements of the role. So my key takeaways when you're looking at skills management, what are you looking for? Are you looking for knowledge? Are you looking for skills? Are you looking for competence? This is my first question. Anytime anyone talks to me about skills development programs, say, what are you trying to achieve? Is it knowledge, skills, or duties? Where are you in the skills management cycle? What is it that you're trying to do? Is it recruit? Is it develop somebody? Who are you doing this for? So that's understanding where this fits in the skills development cycle. And actually using a mix of frameworks is often the right answer. You want to be able to relate the generalist frameworks, the specialist frameworks, the technical skills frameworks, knowledge frameworks, so that it's a consistent, integrated skills and people management approach. That's what the standard is all about. It's about having consistency and an integrated approach to skills and skills management and skills development. So I hope that was interesting. We've now got 10, 11 minutes for some questions. So at that point, let's say Mandy or Gary, have you got some questions for me?
Hello, Kevin.
So we had some questions come in. Oh, I can see one in the chat. Why in the role is the column heading knowledge and competence? Okay, I think Richard, I'm looking at your question back. If we go back to the model, there is a lot of confusion about knowledge and competencies. I've got to say, one of the least helpful implementations is SOFIA Plus, where it is quite confused. It's actually one of the things that made me first go to the standard, or came across when I came across the standard, looked at it. I think actually, I don't know if Ian can come off. Ian Seald from SOFIA Foundation's on the call. I don't know if Ian can come on, but there's a question here: why are, if they are competencies, why are they labelled skills? I think that's a discussion that's been going on in the SOFIA community for some time.
Yes, Kevin.
Would you like to expand on it? Because it is one of the obvious things in the SOFIA framework. It doesn't quite comply with the model.
Well, SOFIA was first produced over 21 years ago, before ISO started having these discussions for a start. It was always talked about as SOFIA was a skills and competency framework. And if you go to industry, the words skills and competence and competency are used almost interchangeably. So it's almost too late to have a definition. I suppose I could put my tongue slightly in my cheek and say, I don't quite know how you'd pronounce CIFA or whatever it is, CFIA. The reality is we have to do something pragmatic for industry. That's where SOFIA came from, and that's what SOFIA is there to support. Industry values what it means by competence, which is that someone can demonstrate that they have performed the role using those skills or competencies within a professional working environment. So that's exactly what we expect if someone is assessed against SOFIA for competence in a particular skill. And that is that they can demonstrate that they've done it for real in a professional working environment, which is very, very different to doing a training course and at best taking a test at the end of it.
So I think the best, most for everything, I think the standard first came out 2008. I think it was the first version. So I think, yes, you're very right. SOFIA has been around longer than the standard, but the standard does a very nice job of actually putting some definition on these particular terms. But yes, is it too late for SOFIA? Probably. There's a question here. Is SOFIA an international standard? Is it like CompTIA? SOFIA is most definitely an international, but it's not an international standard. It's an internationally accepted framework, but it isn't a standard, but it is very closely aligned with what is in the ISO standard. And is it like CompTIA? No, most of what's in CompTIA is knowledge and skills. So CompTIA very much focus on the knowledge area and the application of knowledge. It doesn't really go into any of the competence areas. Ken, you said is competence is the application of knowledge through skills. Yes, demonstrates competence. Sorry, Michelle and Gary, if I missed anything.
So Mary A asks, skills assessment, competencies assessment, etc. Are they not all different things? Like one is theoretical and one is demonstrationable.
Yes, so knowledge is theoretical. Skills are demonstratable, but competence is also demonstratable. So competence is, if you go back to the where I started, competence is the ability to apply skills without support. So I think that's quite a key part to this. Is the difference between skills and competence is really about how you're doing it. Are you doing it in a supported way, or are you doing it solo? So are you able to fly that plane? If I just go back to this slide, here. So knowledge is very much formal off-the-job training. Skill is controlled practice in the workplace. Competence is when you are a full practitioner and you are flying solo. So they're both demonstratable. Skills and competence are demonstratable. It's just the context in which you're demonstrating them has changed between controlled environment and a solo environment where you're unsupported.
So you could also say it's the difference between taking a bit of a test in, for example, a training room, and then actually being able to do the job back at your desk, your office.
Absolutely. That's the core of what the standard is talking about. It's saying we're attempting to get to competence. We want to be proficient in our competence area. That's where you're going to be able to demonstrate you can apply the knowledge and skills in order to achieve success.
Richard Millwood, sorry, shares a comment. So, understand the history of confusion over terminology, part of the human condition, but it is clearly getting in the way of clarity. So thank you, Richard. Andrew Turnbull, did you say that professional registrations such as CITP, CEng are effectively higher level applications of the same approach, or are they different?
They are absolutely the same application. They're the application of exactly the same principles. Underpinning, I know CITP better, but underpinning CITP is a body of knowledge. That body of knowledge gets tested, or used to get tested through a multiple choice test. That's your knowledge test. You then have to demonstrate some skill. That usually takes the form of something like an interview. That is to make sure that you are competent at the level that has been described. So yes, CITP, CEng, they're all based on the same principles. And when you see the generic behavior, the generic skills and code of ethics and practice, it's exactly the same. So all the model at the center of this holds completely for whether it's CEng, CITP, building towards an apprenticeships, an occupational standard, performing an individual job role. They're all based on the same principle. And go back to the model, they are all using this model, and just at a different layer, a different domain breadth. So, as I said, SciBoc is 800 pages. It still applies this model. It's still about certification scheme. But something really small, it could be a single product, can also still apply this model where you need to know knowledge of the product and how it works. You need to be able to demonstrate it in a controlled manner. If you do that, you can be competent in that product. So it can work at very broad level, it can work at a very detailed level.
We've got two more questions.
Yeah.
Mary A asked, I'm trying to make a career transition into tech, healthcare domain, and I keep hearing conflicting things about certifications. Are certifications important? Are they more important for people who don't have diplomas, degrees, masters, etc.? Would you recommend someone just going into apprenticeship or internship instead of certifications?
lots wrapped up in there, but industry certifications, as I mentioned, are largely knowledge tests. Some of them move into the lower levels of skills, but what you're actually looking for when you're making a career change is to demonstrate that you have either the skills and the knowledge to be competent, or you have competency in a particular area. Now, something like a higher level degree can do that. An apprenticeship can do that. Achieving something like CITP can demonstrate that. So having a long list of certifications is great, but it actually generally just demonstrates that you've got a lot of knowledge. Maybe you've got a lot of knowledge and some ability to apply that knowledge in a controlled environment. What you're really trying to demonstrate is that you're competent. And it's that demonstration of competency that's really important. That comes from having the ability to practice, to apply, and to get to that level of proficiency that you demonstrate you are ready to fly solo in a particular domain. That's about achieving competency. So lots of certificates don't add up to competency. Other activities around it that develop the skills and build up the competency do help. So it's a long answer, but just think about when you're looking at a learning program, which of these areas is it enhancing? Is it just a knowledge program? Is it actually building skills, or is it helping you achieve competence? Because you're really trying to get to that competency level where you can say, I can fulfill this role. So hope that helps.
We are actually slightly overrunning. We do have 2 more questions.
Okay.
Do we want to try and answer them today, or would it be better to actually post them onto the website?
We can post them onto the website. I'll just give a quick look. What standard is the most widely used in higher ed in the UK? Most higher education is based on knowledge and skill. Primarily knowledge. Does that help you apply for a job? Interesting debate area. Employers are looking for competency. A lot of discussions about, are you actually building resume or CV worthy skills through higher education can be debatable, particularly if that program is knowledge based. Throw a controversial one in at the end. And so thank you for all the questions. We will go through these and put some further answers into the website. But Mandy, I'm sorry, not Mandy, Michelle, is there anything else in the list we need to cover?
There is 1 or 2, but I think we've actually run out of time.
Yeah, okay. Well, with that, I'd like to say thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I hope that was useful in some way. If we will be posting the recording on the member group website, and if you have access to any of the libraries of ISO standards, then I would strongly recommend you go and get a copy of 24773 Part 1, because certainly for my world, it's been one of the most useful standards that I've come across. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for your contributions and the questions, and look forward to seeing you at the next Learning Development Specialist Group meeting, which will be in September.